All right. So if you guys have any questions through the course of the session, feel free to put those into the chat window. You can also, if you want to put it into the chat, you can send it so that everybody can see it. There's also the ability to send it to a specific person, so you can send it privately to myself. And my colleague Jill is also logged in, so you can send it to her if you would prefer, and then she will relay the question over the audio to me, and I will do my best to answer it. And then again, since it's such a small group of us here today, feel free to just take yourself off of mute and ask any question that you might have in the moment as well. All right, so let's get started. So GW Blogs, today we're going to be talking about obviously what the service is, who can use it. There's always questions about design, so we'll talk about the design options. We'll talk about website accessibility. And then we'll start talking about some things more specific to the service, which is based on WordPress itself. So we'll talk about the difference between a post and a page, what plugins and widgets do and how you set them up, how you set up your home page. That's another one that a lot of people have questions about. And then we'll also talk a little bit, we'll touch on what technical support options that are available to everybody. So getting started with what is GW Blogs. It is a WordPress-based content management system. It's a hosted product, so it's owned by the vendor EduBlogs, and the university pays for access. The product itself is called Campus Press. Because it is hosted third-party, there are some limitations on what we can and cannot do with it. So a lot of people think it's WordPress, so it's just like going out to WordPress.com or WordPress.org and I can do whatever I want. And it's not exactly the same. The reason being because EduBlogs owns it on their servers and maintains it on their servers, they have control over what themes are available and what plugins are available across the platform. And then the next layer to that, as far as any limitations you might encounter, is that the university, so our team, Marketing and Creative Services, and we partner with GW Information Technology on this, our two teams together scoured through all of the templates and all of the plugins, and we, held them up against the light of what are GW's policies on the things that we can and cannot allow for various reasons, like what policies might some of these things run afoul to. So when you combine all that together, we didn't turn on every single theme and plugin to be available to our users because some of them would not be in compliance with the policies that we have. Some of them also are not accessible or responsive for mobile. So for those reasons, you won't see a 100 1-to-1%, a 100% one-to-one of what you would see available from a themes and plugins perspective on WordPress.com and WordPress.org on the GW Blogs platform. And then the last thing is just a little bit of a note. A lot of people hear the name GW Blogs and they say, well, I don't want a blog, I just need a website. You can stand up a standard website on GW Blogs. It's just the name of the service, just because WordPress at its core was built to be a blogging content management system. But if you don't use the blogging components, you don't have to. It's not a requirement. You can just use the standard website components and stand up a small website instead. So don't feel like if you use GW Blogs, you're required to have a blog. You are not. So who can use GW Blogs? Really, it's like anybody at GW can use it. It's open to all current faculty, staff, and students. It's specifically used by administrative and academic offices, and then by faculty, staff, and students for personal sites. For like a lot of faculty use it for their CV sites or their lab sites. Some of the students use it for projects for their courses, or they actually use it as a personal website for themselves. I'm not personally aware of a lot of staff using their personal sites, but if they wanted to, they could. Alumni do not have access, so that's the one thing to keep in mind. If a current student is using it and leaves the university, I believe within 12 months of them being an alumni, the site would be deactivated. The good news is, because it's WordPress, there is an ability to export the content and host it outside of the university's platform. So it's not like you just completely lose your website. You have like a good year to basically get a backup of the site and put it elsewhere. Access is based off of NetID, which is why, again, you have to be a current faculty, staff, or student. So you would log into the platform using your personal NetID credentials. We don't support, well, we don't authorize organizational NetIDs just because they're not secure credentials. We share those amongst our colleagues so that multiple employees, staff, or students can have access to a single account. And we very rarely change those credentials when people matriculate in and out of our offices and our organizations. So because of that, we can't really control who has access. And that is why we say that if you would like to have an organizational account have access to the GW Blogs platform, please do not just sign up without telling us. We do monitor the service frequently for new user accounts, and we'll reach out to you when we see that and just kind of remind you of the policy, and we'll work with you to figure out what's the actual best way to gain access for whoever needs back-end access. So the best thing to do is reach out to us first, let us know what your use case is. Just saying we need multiple people to have access is not actually going to get approved because multiple people can get access with their own personal credentials. So we'll work with you if it actually is appropriate for an organizational account to have the credentials be allowed, but we need to have that conversation first. The other thing is for affiliates, so contract workers outside of the university, they can have access. There's a couple of ways that this can be done. They can either get an affiliate GW NetID and then they can be granted access that way, or if they're using a non-GW email address, we can actually request from the vendor to actually give them access. We're not able to do that ourselves. So if you have somebody outside of the university helping you manage or maintain your website, you need them to have back-end access with their own credentials. Those are your two options. You can either request an affiliate NetID, which is a process owned by GW Information Technologies, and then we can create the GW Blogs account for them, or they can use whatever external web or external email address that they have. So if it's a gmail.com account or something else, we can directly ask the vendor to create what's called a local account for them so that they can log into the platform themselves. Any questions on user access? So still talking about who can use GW Blogs, as I mentioned before, it's really open to everybody from current faculty, staff, and students to use for personal websites, as well as academic and administrative offices. And because of those two unique use cases, we have two different types of sites. The first one is the official GW Blog sites, and these are the ones that are meant to represent official university business, really at the academic and administrative department level. We do not turn these on for personal websites. So if a faculty member comes to us and says, I want to have a CV site and I want it to be official, we actually don't create an official blog site for that. You still go through the process of creating a personal website, and then we'll work with you on getting the appropriate branding in place. So again, the official blog sites are for sites representing official university business. So think a blog that's maybe attached to a department, something for a program. The lab sites, there are a number of lab sites for ECE that are related to the course and not to a specific faculty member. So that's one of those use cases where we create an official blog site for that. Lots of programs and initiatives, centers and institutes, all using those official GW blog templates. And the difference between those templates and what's available to the personal website is it's really just the footer. It's got the horizontal logo for GW in the footer, and then got those institutional links that we're required to have. So the link to the EEO policy, link to our accessibility policy, our privacy policy, all of those things are applied to the official GW blog website templates. Excuse me. On the personal sites, the unofficial blog sites, it does not have that logo or those links. Instead, it's got a disclaimer down there that basically says these views belong to this individual and not to the university as a whole. Otherwise, everything else is the same. It's the same aesthetic scheme, colors and all of that, all of the same functionality. Nothing else is different. It's literally just that footer, the presence or absence of the official university horizontal logo and all of those official institutional policy links. So any questions on those? All right. I'm actually going to answer a question that wasn't asked, but the way that you get one versus the other, if you need an official blog website, there's a form on the blog service site that you would fill out. If you just wanted to stand up your own personal site and move forward, all you have to do is actually log into the platform, again, using your personal GW NetID credentials, and a personal site is immediately created for you. So there are a number of our users who are familiar with GW Drupal, which is the university's official content management system for academic and administrative sites. And the question in those cases comes up, should I be using GW Blogs or GW Drupal? The answer is not really black and white. It depends. If you currently have a GW Drupal website, GW Blogs is not meant to replace that. It can supplement it. So GW Drupal doesn't have blogging capabilities, for instance. So if you wanted to have blogging capabilities, you could use the GW Blogs platform for that and use that to supplement your Drupal website. But it's really not meant to replace an existing Drupal website. The reason why it gets a little bit of a gray area, some of the schools and colleges have been moving towards having their smaller websites on the GW Blogs platform. So for instance, the Elliott School, a few years back made the decision that all of their centers and institutes would use GW Blogs for their websites. And the majority of those centers and institutes actually had pre-existing Drupal sites, but they were transitioned into the GW Blogs platform. That's not always going to be the case across the board for everybody. So if you're running an academic department underneath a school or a college, I would just check in with your central point of contact for the web or for technology within your school or office. So for instance, the Columbian College has the Office of Communications and Marketing, and there's also the Office of Technology Support. Those are your two main points of contact for really anything web under the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. Specifically, I would reach out, though, to the communications and marketing folks. They'll be the ones who can best steer you in whichever is the appropriate direction. And that's how you know, should I be using Drupal or should I be using the Campus Press GW Blog platform. If by chance you come to us first without asking, that's fine. You're not going to get in trouble. We're just going to ask on your behalf. So we'll take your request. We'll forward it along to communications and marketing. They'll let us know if they want us to proceed or if they'll reach out to you guys, whoever the requester is, to get more information. And then they'll let us know how to proceed. Each one of the schools and colleges has either a single person or a team that serves in that role, and we know who each one of those people are. So again, we'll reach out to them on your behalf, but it's always a good idea for you to kind of check and see who that is for yourself and be prepared to kind of run any of those strategy type questions and can I do this type questions through them before reaching out to our office, because we take our lead from them. We actually cannot supersede them and say, you guys are going to get a Drupal site versus a blog site. They're actually the ones who will tell us, and then we'll proceed as they request. The only other question when it comes to should I have a blog site or a Drupal site really comes down to the content of the site. So if it's highly targeted content, like an event, a program or initiative, something like that, blogs is pretty good for that. If it's something where it needs to be much bigger, it warrants a conversation just to kind of figure out how big is this going to be and which platform really is going to work better for you. So in those cases, feel free to put in the request for the official blog site. Our team will take a look at the details of the request, and the appropriate person will reach out to you to either get more information or to give you a recommendation. We've got content strategists on our team, project managers on our team, web production specialists on our team, which I am one of those people, as is Jill. So just based off of the information that you provide us, we'll be able to kind of steer you towards your best platform in those cases. Any questions? All right. So design, what are my design options? As I mentioned earlier, we did not turn on every theme available on the platform. When we launched, we had 3 themes that were turned on, and those are still the 3 themes that are available. We are working on turning on more themes for you guys. As you know, technology is always evolving, and as that happens, we have to evolve with it. So the 3 themes that were turned on, they were initially approved for use because they are accessible for the web, which is something that we've always been working towards, but it has a renewed urgency since 2016. And then we also wanted to make sure that they were responsive for mobile. So not all of the themes that are available are accessible, and not all of the themes that are available will work on mobile devices. So we made sure that the 3 themes that we picked could do both. And then in addition to that, we wanted to make sure from a content management standpoint for you guys, how customizable were they as far as what your home pages would look like. So some themes will only support having a blog feed on the home page. Some themes will only support having a static message on the home page, like from a sub page. So we made sure that we picked themes that could do both. And then everything else out of the box they share is the GW Blue color palette. So you can kind of see an example of that there up on the right. And then the plugin options and widget options, those are theme agnostic. Widgets and plugins can be turned on independent of any given theme. And kudos to EduBlogs here because they made sure that the plugins that they made available work for every single theme that they allow to be activated on their network as well. So you'll never see a plugin on the network that doesn't work across every single theme. As plugins are turned on, that makes the availability of widgets expand as well, be turned on as well. So just like with the plugins, across any theme, if you turn on a plugin, there's also going to be a corresponding widget in some cases. And no matter which theme that you use, that'll be available to you. So those three themes are Tiny Framework, Ward, and White. And we'll take a look at each one of those themes in a little bit more detail in just a moment. But just to give you a quick overview of why we picked those three, Tiny Framework is pretty vanilla, like a standard site, and we knew that because we know that we have a lot of users who just need that. They need to turn on a pretty simple website and immediately get started, and Tiny Framework meets that need. The Ward theme is a little more modern looking, and we have a lot of users who want that. They want something with, full bleed edging with color blocking, and Ward meets that need. And then the White theme is a little bit in between. It's got a rotating banner on the home page. It's got a grid pattern for blog posts, which a lot of people like. So that one kind of meets that in-between need of I want something kind of simple, not too, not too edgy, if you will. Not too, and none of them are difficult to manage, but basically just a little more visual, essentially, more image focused. So each theme was turned on with those in mind. And again, all of those bullet points down at the bottom as well apply to each one of those themes as well. But as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at all of the themes that are available on the platform right now. Those do change as technology changes. So for instance, a theme might become deprecated if the developer who made it is no longer pushing updates to it, at which point EduBlogs will say, okay, it's no longer being updated, which means that at some point it could pose a security risk. So we're going to deprecate it and no longer make it available for new websites to use. They won't turn it off on existing websites, but it will no longer be available for new sites. But on the same token, they'll keep scouring to see what new themes are out there and turn those on the network instead. And then it's on our team to then do our vetting for our policies. There's a little bit of a backlog there, but we are working on it. Any questions about design options when it comes to themes? All right. Still talking about design, specifically photos and graphics. A lot of times, especially with our academic and administrative offices who are used to working with marketing creative services and getting access to images, we get asked, what's available to me as far as photos and design services go. The thing with GW Blogs is it is self-service. It replaced an old legacy service that the university used to host called home.gw.edu sites. And that was where anybody at the university could reach out to IT and say, I want access, I want to have a website. And IT would give you access to space on a server. And then it was your responsibility to have an FTP client to connect to that server, put up your website files, and manage your website. That's how it used to be done way, way back in the day. But now with content management systems, that's no longer necessary. So the GW Blog service replaced that. And so that same level of responsibility still holds true. It's the responsibility of the site owners to gather all of their assets, create all of their content, get everything in, publicize the site to your end users and everything. So there's again a little bit of a gray area when it comes to photos and graphics because a lot of our academic and administrative offices are used to working with our offices to get that. You can still do that in this case. It will incur the billable fee, which I believe is $65 an hour, and that's billed in 15-minute increments. So if you only use 15 minutes, you only pay for 15 minutes. You don't pay for 60. You would need to submit a design project request for that. The link is in the document, which I'll be sharing with everybody. And the project manager who gets assigned to your request will reach out to you to give you more information, including that billable fee that I mentioned. Now, if you just wanted a photo, you didn't want actual graphic design done, you could do that as well. The university photographers have a database of all of the pictures that they take, and at no cost to you, they can, if you give them some information on what it is that you're looking for, they can pull together a small collection of photos for you to use on your website. So for that, you would submit a request for an existing photo from the university photographers. Again, you'll have that link in the follow-up resources that I share. But those options are available to our academic and administrative users. Faculty and staff who are also using it for personal sites, I'm not 100% certain, to be completely honest, on if that's a supported service or not. And I'm fairly certain they will not do it for personal student sites. But your best bet is to put in the request. They'll talk to you and kind of figure out all of those parameters and let you know whether or not that's something that they can take on if this is for a personal website versus an official site for an academic or administrative unit. Any questions there? All right. So I've mentioned website accessibility a little bit, but to give you guys more of an overview of what that is, website accessibility refers to how easy it is for somebody who has a visual, physical, cognitive, possibly hearing disability or challenge, how easy it is for them to use your website. That's what it used to be web accessibility, but it's more commonly now referred to as digital accessibility. So you want to make sure that no matter how somebody is getting to your website, they are able, and that includes whatever browser they're using, that they're able to get the information that they need and to perform the actions that they need to perform on your website. Because it's going to be different for people based off of what device they use. Not everybody is using a desktop computer or a laptop. Not everybody's even using a phone or a tablet. Some people are having to use screen readers to consume, the information. Again, if they might have a visual or cognitive disability, that makes it difficult for them to just look at the screen and consume the information that way. There are also users who maybe have motor disabilities, mobility challenges, and it's not always permanent. It's not always somebody who, God forbid, lost a limb. It could be that they had trauma, like they got into a car accident and they broke their wrist or their arm or something. So people have situational challenges also that they have to deal with. And there's also technology limitations that we have to keep in mind. Somebody might not have, Wi-Fi at home. They might be on a low bandwidth mobile network and they need to be able to access the information on your website, and it's, taking a long time to load, or they can't see everything, things like that. So digital accessibility covers a wide gamut of things, but the core of it is making sure that no matter the challenge that somebody's dealing with when getting to your website, you need to make sure that you created your website and created your content in a manner that they can still get the information that they need or take whatever actions that they need to take. For content managers, I know that can sound overwhelming, but it really comes down to a few core best practices. And when it comes to, so the first one being your images, when it comes to your images, always making sure that your images have descriptive alt tags on them. And what the alt tag is, there's actually a field called alternative text. That field will be read aloud to somebody who is using a screen reader, and it should be describing what's in the visual. A lot of people fall into the trap of putting in just the word photo or putting in the file name for the image, but that's what's going to be read to somebody who's using that screen reader. So they're just going to hear photo, and they're going to have absolutely no idea what's going on in that visual, that graphic, that photo, whatever it might be. Or they'll hear that file name, and that's just as bad. They're going to have no context for what's in that visual. And this can be especially challenging when someone uses a flyer as an image or puts the flyer into the page as the entirety of the content of the page. We actually get a lot of people who say, I want to embed a PDF on the page so people can just see the PDF on the page. And we always say, no, you don't want to do that because it's inaccessible. It's very easy for us from a content administrative standpoint to just say, there, it's up there, people can get to it. But if I can't see that image, if I can't see that PDF document on the page, I have absolutely no idea what's in it. So your visuals on your page, you want to make sure they're not putting all of the crucial information that people need in that graphic. And if you are, that crucial information needs to be in that alt text field while also describing what's going on in the visual as well. So that's just something to keep in mind whenever you're putting images on the page and whenever you're putting documents on the page as well. The next thing as a content manager to keep in mind when it comes to digital accessibility is how you're using the subheads on your page. So that's when you take, under the I'll show you guys this when we actually log in, which will happen soon, I promise. There's a style dropdown on the text editor so that you can say this is a subhead 2 or subhead 3 or subhead 4. What that means is you're breaking up the topics on the page with those subheads, and they do have a visual component to them where it will make the text typically bigger and bold in some kind of way. If it's really custom design, it might use a different type of font. And people see that and they're attracted to it and they think that's really pretty and it grabs the eye. And so I'm going to use that anytime I want something to grab the eye. The problem is there's a programmatic element to it as well. There's a tag around it that search engines are seeing and screen readers are seeing. And they are specifically looking for those tags to know what topics are on this page. So if somebody's using a screen reader, they can say, I don't want to read all of the text on this page. I only want to read the subheads. If you're using those subheads as a decorative element and not to define the topics on the page, you've now trapped that user into listening to whatever text that you've decided to decorate with the subhead style instead of using it to define the topics on the page so that they can, quote unquote, scan the page to get to the information that they need. Same thing for your SEO. Search engine crawlers will index what subheads are on your page so that if somebody does just the right keyword search, it'll match them to that page. But again, if you're using those subhead styles to decorate your text instead of define your topics, then the search engines won't give accurate results to users, and that will be frustrating to them, and it can actually drop you in the results over time because the search engines will see no one's ever clicking on this link because it's not actually giving them the information that they need. So you want to make sure that you're using your subheads appropriately to define the topics on your page and not as text decoration. You want to avoid using too many moving elements. For your users with visual and cognitive challenges, this can be really, really difficult for them. If they're using a screen reader, there's something called focus that screen readers can pick up on, and that's basically saying focus on this element next. With a moving element, sometimes it's not coded appropriately for accessibility. So every time it maybe slides to the next slide in a rotator, the focus shifts back up to that element, and then the user basically gets trapped in it. Hopefully that doesn't happen, with all of the plugins and the animated plugins and things like that, but it's just something to keep in mind. And then for those users with cognitive challenges, it can just be really hard for them to figure out what to actually visually focus on if there's a lot of things that are moving. So you just want to avoid using too many moving elements. And then finally, you want to avoid using colors with low contrast against the background. So we have a pretty robust color palette at GW, but not all color combinations will work well together for color contrast, digital accessibility compliance. And I did a training on this a couple months back. So I will share that with you guys so that you can get a download on what that is. But basically what it means is just making sure there's enough color contrast between your foreground color and your background color. And it's not always enough to say I've got a light color and a dark color because there's actually a specific ratio of light to dark that needs to be met for it to pass digital accessibility compliance. So again, I'll share that training with you guys so you can see exactly how detailed that gets, and you can make some better decisions when it comes to the color contrast and the color combinations that you choose. Any questions? I know I just went over a lot in a very short amount of time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead now and get logged into the back end of a GW blog site. If you would like to follow along on your own, what you'll want to do is go to blogs.gw.edu. There will be a login link in the menu. It will take you to the NetID login page. Use your personal credentials to log in. If this is your first time doing it, it's going to create a personal website for you, and feel free to use that for testing and training today. And then if you don't want to do that, feel free to just follow along with what I'm doing. So let me pull up the site and let me share this with you all so you can see it. Okay, so you should now be seeing the GW Blogs homepage. I'm going to go ahead and go through the steps I just mentioned before, logging in with the NetID credentials. Now, as I mentioned previously, use your personal NetID credentials. I'm going to use my team's organizational NetID credentials because we use this for training purposes with you all. Otherwise, I would be logging into my own personal site, but I use my personal site to do a whole other slew of testing, and it's just a mess. Okay, so when you log into the back end of GW Blogs, you're going to be brought into what's called the reader. You'll see any blog posts that you have posted in a listing here, some snapshot information about how your blog is performing, how many sites you have access to, things along those lines. And then you'll always see this admin bar at the top as you're logged in. But when you're specifically in your dashboard, you will see these links going down the left side. So the first thing we are going to actually do is go to the settings of this blog site. So this is the first thing that I like to do whenever I turn on a new site for somebody, but I want you guys to be aware of these things as well. So the first thing I like to do is go to settings, and then I go to this link right here for admin bar. And what I like to do, and it's already done here, is I like to uncheck the checkbox for subscriber, and I like to uncheck the show admin bar when viewing site for logged out users. Because what that does is if I'm not a subscriber on your site or I'm not logged into the backend of GW Blogs, this black admin bar will not be visible. So for instance, if I go to, let me see, if I go to there we go. So you see how I don't have access to a login bar on their site. That's because I'm not a subscriber on their site, and I'm not logged, as far as the system is aware, I'm not logged into the back end of the site. I actually am, but because they've got a vanity URL, because they are an institute, it's not picking up that I'm logged into the site. But that's what happens if you uncheck those boxes. If you don't uncheck those boxes, you will still see this black admin bar, and it'll have a login option up here, and I think it says like dashboard over here. So I just feel like it looks a little bit unprofessional for someone's site to have a login link up there at the very top. You will always be able to log into the service from the blog's homepage, so you don't need to have that login link at the top of your site. It's your own personal preference if you do, but that's just something that I tend to turn off for everybody. And this is where I do it. The second thing I'm going to show you under settings still is under the reading section. A lot of users ask about the privacy status of their site. The default privacy settings for any site is to allow all search engines to index this site, but there are other privacy settings that you can use. The next one down is to discourage search engines from indexing this site, and this one is pretty popular, especially for personal sites. Basically, it's telling the search engine crawlers, please don't look at my site, please don't put it into a web search that somebody may do, but it's still technically a public live website. So that's one that a lot of people like to use if they are, again, if it's their personal site, or if they're working on a site for an academic or administrative user or unit, and they need to share the link for other people to see and provide approvals and reviews. That's one way to be able to do it. It's not a guarantee. You'll see there's a note here that says neither of these options blocks access to your site and that it's up to the search engine to honor your request. But I can tell you that since we've had the platform turned on, every site that I've seen have this setting checked, I've never had them show up in search results. So I'm pretty confident when I say that it works. So then the next three settings are actually, well, really four settings. Lock your site down a little bit more and more. The first one where it says visitors must have a login link. This is basically saying that anybody on the GW Blogs platform can access your site. When it says gain access, it just means they can view the site. It doesn't mean they can actually edit your site. It means that they can view your site. So logged into the back end of GW Blogs, anybody who had the link to your website could see your site. The next one down, only registered users can access. This is if you go to users, all users, and that's right here. Anybody who would be listed under that section of the site, they would be able to see your website at whatever level you've given them access. So, just restricting it just a little bit more from the one that we were just previously looking at. The next one says only administrators can visit, and what that means is under that users, all users section, there are different permission levels that a user can have in the back end of the site, and there's one specifically called administrator, and this privacy setting locks it down to just those people. So if somebody is an editor on the site, they wouldn't be able to see it. If somebody was a subscriber, they wouldn't be able to see it. Only somebody with administrator access would be able to see the site. And that does mean they would have to log into GW Blogs to see it. And then this last one locks it down even more, but in a different way. And it basically just lets you generate a password for anybody to be able to see your site, period. So that allows you to remove the restriction of somebody having a GW Blogs account. But it does put a password restriction on the site. So it's sort of like having a quasi-public site, because search engines will see the site and it will return in search engine results. But if I don't have this dedicated password, if I click on the link in the search engine results, I'm going to see a page that's asking me for that password. So otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see the content. So this can be helpful when you have like a conference or something like that, where there's specific information that you want attendees to see, but nobody else. A lot of people like to use this setting for that reason. You can do it at the site level, which is what we're looking at here. But there's also a way to do that on a page-by-page level if that's something of interest to you. So we'll take a look at that as well. But that is the different privacy options available to you on your site. Any questions there? All right. Moving on. Well, actually, before I leave here, the last thing I'm going to just point out, but we're not really going to get into the weeds on this one, is you can connect to a Google Analytics account if you would like to. Again, under Settings and then Google Analytics. You would have to have a Google Analytics account already set up, and then you would just put in whatever that analytics code is into this field to get it all set up. You can't use your GWU account to set up an analytics account. That's the only thing to keep in mind. You'd have to use a gmail.com email address. Just make sure that it's an office gmail.com address. So for instance, our team has, I think it's gwonlinestrategy@gmail.com, so that we have access to Google Analytics and YouTube and some other services that we cannot connect to our gwu.edu email accounts. Don't sign up for Google Analytics with your own personal gmail.com account, or even one that you create just for like work purposes, because if you leave your position for any reason, it cannot be transferred. It's yours, you're keeping it. So the office who then needs access would be in a position of either having to beg you for access as a user, or they would have to start a whole new account and lose all of that historical data. So just make sure that if you're creating an analytics account for the first time, create an office gmail.com account. Don't attach it to your own personal Gmail account. Okay. So then the next thing I do once I'm done with the settings section is I go to users. And this is where you can actually add users who need to have backend access to the site. And the way that you do that is the person has to already be a GW Blogs user. They can't never have logged into the service for themselves. So if this was a new employee who's on your staff now and their responsibility is going to be to manage the site, the first thing they need to do is go to blogs.gw.edu and go through the login steps. Then you can go here under users and click this add existing option, and then you would put in their email or their NetID username, and then you would determine which level of permission you want. So administrator is basically full access to manage the content, site configurations, everything, and then the permissions get less and less as you go from editor to subscriber. Subscriber is the default. I don't know why. Calendar Plus is turned on because of a plugin I have turned on, so you're not going to see that unless you have that same plugin turned on. But most people are usually either an editor, an administrator, or an author from what I've seen. But again, you need to make sure that they have logged in before. You would put in their NetID username or their full email address, and it's not going to show you anything. You just click add existing user. If that person has logged in to the platform before, you'll get a success message. If they have not, you'll get a message that says something like I think it's something like this user is denied. Please contact your system administrator, something along those lines. It's kind of very misleading, and we can't customize what that error message says, unfortunately. But more than likely, it's a matter of that person has never logged into GW Blogs before, so the system can't find a matching user account to grant access to this site. So again, just make sure that they've logged in before you try to add them, because that's why it says add existing user. It's looking for somebody who has a pre-existing account on GW Blog. So then once I've got my users and my account, the next thing most people want to do is come on over to appearances, which is what we're going to do. So when you get to appearance, you'll see that there are, depending on personal or official site, there are going to be 3 themes available to you. And again, the themes between personal and the unofficial ones and the official ones are identical except for that footer. You'll get the logo and the institutional links if you're official. You'll get the disclaimer if you're unofficial. That is the only difference. So you're either, if it's a personal site, you're only going to see 3 themes. If it's an official site, you're going to see all variations. So you'll see 6, but you'll just see that there's a little bit of the duplication with the thumbnails. And then you'll notice in the titles, that's where you need to pay attention. So if it's an unofficial one, it'll say the theme name - unofficial. If it's official, it'll say the theme name, and then it'll say blue for the GW Blue color palette to let you know that it's the official variant. So just make sure if you're working with an official site that you're using the official templates, because you want to get that logo and you want to get those institutional links in the footer of your site. And then once you're down here, it's very easy to switch from theme to theme. You can see you just hover over them, and then you have that activate option. Right now, our unofficial Tiny framework is active. So if I go up here to the admin bar and I click on Visit Site and open that in a new tab, you'll see, as I mentioned before, it's a pretty vanilla site. It's got space up here for the site title or logo if you would like. That's a somewhat new feature. It used to only support the site title. Navigation, and then you can have a header banner, and then the body text for your, this is the home page, but this would also be the body text for the subpage. And then it's got a single sidebar here. It is possible for this to be a blog roll instead. And it is also possible to hide this sidebar and just have everything go across the full width of this space. It's entirely possible to do both. But this is what a basic standard homepage is going to look like in this theme. If I wanted to use a different theme, I typically do it through the dashboard, but I think you can also change it from here. So that customize button allows you to see a live preview of your site as you make configuration changes. It's not a content management aspect. It's about changing the configuration of how your site is laid out. So what's going to be up here in the site title space, what theme you're using. You can do some work on the navigation here if you would like to. If a header is supported, you can change that here as well. So I'm just going to quickly show you how my site would change if I change each theme. And as I do that, I want to clarify for you all that as you change from theme to theme, you don't lose content, but you'll notice that things shift around, and that's because the themes are developed differently. One theme might have that, like on the last theme we were looking at, Tiny Framework, I had that right sidebar. This theme doesn't have a sidebar. Instead, it's got this space right here. This is where it's going to put all of the widgets that were showing up in the sidebar on the previous theme. And then the content for my site now goes across the full content width of the space, the full width of this content area. Excuse me. Drink really quick, excuse me. But I didn't actually lose any information. Things just shifted around. So you might find you need to do some reconfiguration if you decide to change your theme, but you shouldn't lose any content. So this is the GW Ward theme. As I mentioned previously, this one is a little more modern looking. It doesn't focus so much on visuals as much as it does on color blocking design, like design using color, and the text as design. So it's got this space up here called the jumbo headline. It's an optional space. A lot of people who use the theme, we've seen that they like to use it to title their site, but you can see if you don't use it, it just disappears. And then you just have this widget space here, which is also an optional space, and it would go away if you weren't using any widgets, and then it would just immediately go into your site content. It's a little bit jarring, obviously, for people to see that. So again, a lot of people like to use the jumbo headline space to title their site, and yeah, I think that works pretty well, pretty successfully. Um, so if I were to change my theme again, the next one is the white theme. So I'm going to activate this GW white unofficial theme. And you can see, again, things are going to shift around once we get that live preview. And some new things are going to show up as well. I have played around with this theme before. The system is remembering the things that I did previously, so it's showing those things to me now. So this theme supports having a rotating hero, a rotating banner on the home page. This would not appear on the subpages. And as additional banners are put in, they can be accessed from either these rotational arrows here, and then there's also these dashes here at the top that let users know there's more than one. You'll notice that, I think my second image might have gotten deleted, but you'll notice that when I try to go to that second image, it looks like everything jumps down. This space, oh, there it goes. This space does not have confined dimensions for what image is there. So that's going to be one of the things you need to be cognizant of if you're using this theme, what images you put into that space. You're going to want to make sure for the cleanest look that they all have the same height, so that you don't get this sort of jumping effect as it goes from banner to banner. If you don't, you are going to get this jumping effect as it goes from banner to banner if they've all got different heights on them. This theme also, I mentioned before, it focuses more on images. By default, it usually has a black the navy blue, GW blue background. I put an image in there. But then the other thing it does down here is for the blog feed. I mentioned earlier that it's more image focused. So here we go. I'm looking for homepage settings. So you, for each one of these themes, when you're in this customized interface, there's an option for your homepage settings. It might alternatively be called front page settings. And it's basically just asking, do you want a static message from a subpage on your homepage, or do you want to have your latest post showing up in a blog feed? So you would just toggle between those two options, and then you would have whichever selection that you've chosen be what shows up on your homepage. For this theme, because it is image focused, it does require there to be a main featured image on your blog post. If you don't have a main featured image on your blog post, you get this no image available broken image icon. So that's just something to keep in mind with this theme. We've had a number of people use this theme because they like that it has the rotator, but then they have a problem with this section and they say, well, can we hide that? No, because that's the way that the theme was designed and developed, and that's just the way that it is. We didn't do any functional customizations to any of these themes. All we did was give them a GW color palette so that when we turn these sites on for you guys, they're already in brand. But the way that it functions out of the box is the way that it functions for you. So that's just something to keep in mind, again, when you're using this theme. The other thing to know about this theme is that by default, it has these two sidebars for the home page. It's possible to hide one of them. It's a configuration thing you need to do when you're creating your site pages or your blog post pages. And if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out for support, and I'll help you do that. It's always going to show two by default, though. So if you don't have something configured for that second sidebar, the defaults are like, I think it's recent comments, recent posts, the metadata options for like logging into your site and things along those lines. And again, they cannot be hidden unless you configure them to do so appropriately when you're creating your back-end content. So just let me know if that's something you would like to do, and I'll definitely help you do that. So that's a quick breakdown of the different themes. Now, specifically showing you guys this customized menu. As I mentioned before, this is how you're going to customize the layout of your site. You're not going to be creating content from here. You're going to be telling the site what to do with the content as you create it. So where to put it, like where should it show? How do I want it to show up on my home page? What do I want to happen with my navigation as I create new navigation links, things along those lines. Your basic settings are always going to be your site title. If there's an ability to upload a logo, there will be an uploader there as well. The tagline on all of these, the default one is, I think it's just another GW website. And that will typically show up right underneath your site title. It's not showing up here for whatever reason, but usually it shows up right under here where you've got your site title. But again, if you put a logo there instead, it's actually going to not show the title and that tagline. It's going to show just the logo instead. And in all cases, it's going to link back to your homepage. For this theme, because it's got a slider, there's a tab here for that. So the first thing you'll do is enable or disable the slider and indicate how many slides you want in it. There is a max of 5, so keep that in mind. And then once you have enabled it, you'll then get these options here to actually configure what's in each one of those slides. The colors section, it's looking at the background color of your site. So right now I've got an image there. So I'm going to remove that. So you can see it's back to that default blue. This is what it's going to look like out of the box. If you go to this color admin, you can change that to be something else. We ask that you don't do that because, again, they are already in brands. So they're using the GW official colors. And then it's also for accessibility. You want to make sure you're not using something that's going to be hard for somebody who's got a visual challenge or a cognitive challenge. Different colors are harder for some people to pick up on and to consume. So you want to make sure you're not changing these colors unless you really absolutely have to for some reason, or you've vetted to make sure that they're A, in brand, and B, accessible. The next one, this theme specifically has a social icon section because it has these little tabs over here that can link over to your social media platforms. Not all themes will have this, so that's something to keep in mind, but there is a way to still get sort of a visual link out to social media networks, which I will show you. But this theme, all you have to do is put in the link to your profile, indicate which service it's using. It's a fairly short list here. There used to be an other option, but I don't see that now. But yeah, it's once you put in the link and indicate which service it is, that icon will automatically be there for you and link over to your account. We already looked at background image for a brief second, but all you do is you would click select image, pick an image from either your media library, or you would actually upload one by clicking on select files and uploading one from your hard drive. When you do that, it will give you options as far as how to anchor the image, and what that means is, do you want the image to be anchored from the top right, from the middle, the top left, from the middle, the top right, bottom, middle, or left as well. You can also set it so that as you're scrolling your site, the image stays fixed or it scrolls with the page. So it gives you all of those options. There is this menu section as well here. Different themes could potentially have more than one menu location. So this theme only has, or actually this theme has 2 menu locations. There's one at the top, our primary menu location, and then there is supposed to be one in the footer as well for your social media links. I think that we accidentally overrode that one, and that's why you don't see anything here. But that's something to keep an eye on if your theme provides space for more than one set of menu links or not. Typically, if it has 2, the second link location is in the footer, and it's really geared towards social media. So having, again, another place to link out to your social media accounts. Widgets, this is how, so let's see, here's our widget spaces here. They do show up on the sidebar on this theme. This is where you can indicate what widgets you want to show up in your site and where. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, widgets there are a bunch of default widgets that are available. So for instance, your recent posts, your recent comments, archives. There's a subscribe to my blog widget. Like there's a lot of widgets, and I can click into this to actually show you. There are a lot of default widgets, but there's also some that get turned on as you turn plugins on. And I'll show you what some of those look like in a minute. But you can basically, when you click to add a widget, you'll get the search bar at the top where you can look for something specifically by name, or you can just scroll through all of your options that are available and pick the one that you want. It creates a drag and drop interface over here. So if you wanted your search box to be above your archive, you would just drag it up. Your live preview will change to show you what that looks like. And then whenever you like your changes, you just click your activate and publish button there. Getting out of widgets, the last one we already mentioned. Again, it's your homepage settings. Sometimes it's referred to as front page settings, and this is just where you indicate I want just my blog post to show, or I want to show a static message from a subpage instead. If you choose that static page option, you'll pick whatever page it is that you want to be that static message. If you don't have one available, it does give you a short link here to create one. And then if you still want to have a page that's going to serve as a landing page for blog post pages, this post page option down here, this is where you indicate that. So you don't lose the ability to have a page for your blog feed just because you've chosen your home page to be a static message. You just have to dedicate a separate page to do that for you now instead. Again, I've only got the one published page right now, so I don't have a different option to choose from. But if I did, I could pick that right here, maybe something called latest headlines. And then whenever somebody clicked over to the latest headlines page, that's how they would see all of my blog posts instead of seeing them on my home page. Any questions about this customized interface? All right. So I'm going to click the X, and when I do this, it's going to revert everything that I did because I don't think I saved anything. So we're going to go back to the old theme that I had, all of my old configurations, because I didn't save anything. If I clicked Activate and Publish, I would have committed using that other theme. I would have committed using the blog feed as my home page setting, and that would now be the live version of my page. There's no in-between state with that when you're using that Customize option. If you click that Save button, it's committed and it's live, so keep that in mind. It's not something that you can use to kind of test something. You can always look at that live preview, which is great. I love the live preview. But if you're trying to just test something and you don't want to commit to it, don't click the Save button because it does immediately become live. All right, so let's go back into our dashboard, and let's take a quick look at the plugins and widgets. So plugins enhance the functionality of your website. There are somewhere in the range of 24 plugins that are available. So when you click on plugins, it takes you to all of the available plugins. As you identify the ones that you want to use to again, expand the functionality of your site, all you have to do is click the Activate button, and then it becomes an activated plugin. If you want to see which ones you have active at any given moment, there are shortcut toggles for that. You just click on that active button or that inactive button, and you can see, I have 15 inactive, I've got 7 active. If I decide I no longer want to use one, I just click that deactivate button, and it's no longer an active plugin. If I'm not sure how a plugin works once I've turned it on, or even if I want to know what it does before I turn it on, all you have to do is click on this documentation link. It'll take you over to what's called the EduBlog user guide, specifically to the page for that plugin. But just so you know, the EduBlog user guide is the best thing. It is how I learned how to use the system from end to end, and how I'm still learning how to use it because, again, technology is always evolving, so things are always changing. Things get updated, things go away, things get added. So whenever there's something new or something different, I look at the EduBlog user guide for that specific thing, and I learn how to use it. And I definitely recommend that you all do that as well. So you can see here for the Add This Social Share plugin, it gives you screenshots of what you can expect to see, and it walks you through step by step for what you need to do for the configurations for everything. And it does that for basically every plugin in the site. There's only a handful that I've seen where they don't have it. So you can see like right here, these few don't have it. I can't tell you why they do it in some cases and not in others, other than maybe once you turn it on, it's pretty self-explanatory, or it's something that's like third party and they can't really give you documentation for it because the third party maybe has the documentation that you need. But by and large, you're going to see that documentation link for every single plugin, and it can then walk you through the steps of how to use it. The plugins that I always recommend be used, not necessarily this accessibility one, which I know might sound confusing. The reason being, it doesn't give you as a site owner additional tools. It gives additional tools to your website visitors. So it gives them the option to change your site from high contrast colors or not, to increase the size of the font, and a few other things. The thing is, end users with these types of challenges pretty much always already have their own devices set up in the way that they want to use them to do these things for them. So I'm not going to say don't use it. I'm just going to say it's, again, not giving you tools as a content manager. It's providing some additional tools to your end users that they might already have. So it could just basically be redundant. The next one I recommend is this Calendar Plus plugin. It's the pretty much the only one that we have right now for event management. So I definitely recommend turning this one on. Divi Builder, I still like this one, and I say still like it because when we get to the page editing portion, I'm going to get a little more into the details on this, and I'm also going to send you guys some additional links. But basically what Divi Builder allows you to do is to create more dynamic layouts on your page. So if you want to add a rotator within the page, it allows you to do that. It's got some fun things like countdown timers, sliders, a number of things. The thing is, with the latest version of WordPress, a lot of those types of things got built into the core of WordPress. So there's some overlap in the things that they can do now. And using the new editor in WordPress is going to meet the needs of the majority of our users. So you don't really need to use Divi, but it's still there. You can still use it if you're finding that you just prefer that interface for one, or you've already been using it and you're just familiar with it and don't want to change. Or it might have a feature that the standard WordPress editor doesn't have. So I still like to point it out and recommend it so that users can kind of hold them both up against the light and see which one actually meets your needs. I like the Edit Flow plugin because it creates a workflow in the back end. So you can basically say, for this user, when they create a page, if you give them like a lower level permission, maybe they're just an author and they're not actually able to publish something, you can use the Edit Flow plugin to create a workflow that says when they have a page that they're done working on, they need to now select the next level approver to be notified to review the page and publish it themselves. So I think the Edit Flow plugin can be really helpful in those cases, especially if you're an office. We have a lot of offices where they have student staff who come in and maybe for like one semester, maybe for a year, and one of their primary responsibilities is adding content to the site, but maybe they don't necessarily want them publishing to the front end of the site. Edit Flow can be a great way to kind of control what that workflow is. Formidable Forms, to be able to create forms on your site. And then Pixabay Images, I like this one because it gives you access to free-to-use images on the internet. A lot of our users unknowingly steal pictures from the internet. They'll have an idea for what kind of image that they want. They'll go to Google, put in some keywords, then click on that Images tab and save it directly from the Google Images search results. That is stealing photos from the internet. If you don't have the explicit permission for whoever created that image to use it, there's a very good chance that you're not allowed to use it. Just because it's showing up in the results doesn't mean it's free to use. It just means it exists on the internet. But the photographer who took the photo or the designer who created the graphic maybe only created it for a very narrow use case. And if somebody else wants to use it outside of that use case, you have to get that photographer or that designer's permission. That can be a little bit of a hurdle for some people, or it can be something that most people just don't think about. So what Pixabay Images is it's a search for free-to-use, professionally taken photos and professionally designed graphics. And I'll show you what it looks like in the course of the page itself. But the important thing to know is that they're free to use. You don't have to, just kind of hope and pray that it's got the free to use Creative Commons license on it. These have already been designated as free to use. So I always recommend turning on that Pixabay Images plugin as well. So let's go ahead and create a page, and let's talk about the difference between pages and posts as I do this. So with your pages, these are basically evergreen standalone pages that are not really beholden to when they were created. Your post, these are your blog post pages. The publication date, the date that you create that blog post or potentially backdate that blog post, is what's going to drive where this page appears in your site. So as I mentioned before, on your homepage, you can have a blog feed if you would like, or you can have a different landing page that's got a blog feed on it. The order of the posts on your blog page are going to depend on the date from the blog post page. Sometimes users will come, and because post is the first thing at the top that you see, they'll just click that and they'll create a new one, and they'll create like their About Our Office page as a blog post page. And they'll see it on their home page as the first thing that they see. But then they go and they create a different blog post page for like our research, and then they'll see that it drops down as the second thing that you see on the home page, and they're like, what happened? I don't know what's going on. The problem is blog post pages were created as opposed to standard evergreen website pages. So that's the difference between the two. Your pages are your standard evergreen website pages that will not drop down in a list based on publication dates. They won't move at all. As you create them, wherever you link to them, they will always be linked to from that place. Blog post pages are more dynamic. They will drop down in the blog feed based off of the blog post date, and it's always going to be newest one at the top, oldest one at the bottom. They also have some additional things that show up on the front end. You'll see a comment box by default. You'll see the metadata for when the post was published, who created the blog post, if there are any tags or categories attached to it. All of those things will show up as well. So those are the things to keep in mind when you're trying to determine if you want to create a post or a page. Is this an evergreen page, or is it date specific? If it's date specific, you want a blog post. If it's evergreen, you want a standard page. So I'm going to create a standard page now. One thing I need to do before I do that. Again, we're on the latest version of WordPress right now, but this is, it's fairly new. It got pushed just a few months ago. And so because it's still fairly new, you have the option of using the older text editor or the newer text editor. And the way you can change that is you go to Settings, you go to Writing, and then right here where it's asking for the default editor for all users, the classic editor is what will be toggled by default. If you want to start using that new editor that I mentioned before that allows some of those dynamic things to be added, you want to switch that to block editor. The next one beneath that is it says to allow users to switch editors. So that means if you have multiple users with access on the back end of your site, can they independently say, I want to use the new one or I want to use the old one? This is where you can kind of set that. Either everybody's using it or nobody's using it is what this is basically saying. So if you say, yes, they can switch the editors, you're saying people can choose. If you say, no, they cannot, everybody's using it or nobody's using it. So just keep that in mind. So now I'm going to go to create a new page. So this is what the new editor looks like, and it's a big departure from what we're used to with our classic editors, whether that be Drupal or WordPress. You no longer see, your title field at the top and all of those sort of standard word processing icons we're used to seeing, where you've got like your subhead drop down, bolding and italics, and adding a link. You don't see those at the outset. Instead, you see this. And the idea with the new editor is you're adding blocks of content, like chunks of content, and each block can have a different function. So it can be a block that's supposed to function as just text. That could be what it is. It could be a block that's supposed to have an image in it. It can be a block that's supposed to have a slider in it. It's designed to allow you to add more things onto the page all in one location more easily. When you first turn on the block editor, you're going to get some tooltip pop-ups that kind of help you walk through how to use it. I'm going to disable those for now so that we can keep going because I just saw the time. The first thing you're going to see is this big space right here to add your page title. So I'm going to call this Natasha's. Let me spell my name right. Natasha's. I'm really going to spell my name right. Blogs 101 page. And then I'm going to hit Tab. And you can see that a couple of things happen. There are some in-context icons that will pop up. These are menu icons for like the next thing I can do on the page. Down here, because I do have that Divi Builder plugin enabled, it's asking me, do I want to create this page using Divi Builder or do I want to use the WordPress default editor? I'm going to say I'm going to use that WordPress default editor. So now that big block goes away and I've got this space instead. And it can be difficult to see because there's no frames around it, right? Like when I hover over here, we see this frame here. So we know that this is the active section that I'm in right now, but we don't get that down here. What we get instead are these in-context icons, menu options that pop up. But again, if I just wanted to start typing in the text from my page or pasting in the text from my page, all I have to do is click there, and then I can start typing in whatever the text from my page is. So this is the text for my website page. So this is a single standalone text block, and it knows that the most common thing people are going to do next is just start putting in text. That's why that's so easy to do. But if you wanted to do something a little more dynamic, you have a couple of options. But before I go into that, I want to show you these options up here will always be specific to the block that you're using. So because I've started typing in text, the system immediately recognized that I'm putting in a standard block of text in this space. So it's giving me options for formatting my text, adding links to it, and then there are a few other options here as far as some of them are configuration options. And then this one in particular, if you're comfortable working with HTML, you can toggle this one and get into that. But yeah, this is how you can basically do some additional configuration things. This first one here, I ignored it on purpose, but this allows you to say, you know what, I didn't want this to be a standard paragraph text block. I wanted it to be something else. It's going to limit the options that you have based on what you started with and what it can easily switch it to. So like if you start with the paragraph one, it's not going to give you the option to change that to like a big image. You have to pick for the ones from the ones that also use text in them. So that's why I can change it to heading. I can change it to a list, a quote, pre-formatted text, or verse. But that's a way to quickly change from one type to the other if you would like to. So if I now wanted to add a new block to the page, I have a couple of options. I can go click on this More Options menu link, and I can say Insert something before or after. I can also go over here up to the top and say Add a block and pick from these options. I'm going to do it from here just because I want to show you guys there are quite a few options. You can search for something by type or title here if again, it's fairly new, so you're probably not going to know the names of everything. So you can search for something here if you would like to, or you can scan through the list of options, and they are all grouped together in sort of categories. The first one being the most commonly used ones. And then there's another one down here called Common Blocks. It's not necessarily saying that these are the most commonly used, but they are common in the sense like people will typically want to upload a file or have a nice big image or possibly link to some sort of audio file. So these aren't uncommon to have on a web page, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the most commonly used all the time, and that's why they don't necessarily get put into that most common block up here at the top. So by and large, you're probably going to stick to these. And so you would just click on the one that you want next. It's going to add that block into the page. And again, you'll have those in context menus for things that you can do. So I added the cover image block, which allows me to now put an image, a nice big pretty image here on my page. So I love my puppies. We're going to pick puppies. You can see once I've attached an image to be uploaded, on the right rail here, I can see the details about that image. I can see the file name, the file size, the file dimensions, everything. I can edit it if I need to, as in resizing it. I can also delete it if I want to. I'm not going to do that now. And then down here, you want to pay particular attention to these fields, specifically, as I mentioned before, that alt text field. This is where you want to describe for your users what is going on in that visual. So I have my alt text here that says puppy stares out at you from a box, because that's literally what you see in that image. If it was this one here instead, where it's got both sort of a visual going on as well as some text, you need to think of the best way to describe that. So I've got artwork on the steps of Duquesne Hall reading, who says you have to step on someone to get to the top. So now people know what text is in that image, but they also know that there's a visual aspect to it as far as the fact that it's a photograph. I don't know if I ever used this one. Yeah, so this one says it's a blue rose with dew on its petals. The majority of these images I uploaded myself from my hard drive, but some of these I uploaded with Pixabay. When you use that Pixabay app, and I will show you how to use that in a few moments, it does get uploaded to the back end of your site, and you do have that ability to put in that alt text. You can see right here where it's got the caption. There's a reference to where it was uploaded from Pixabay and to the photographer as well. But you always update this alt text box so that it's descriptive for users who either can't see that image for whatever reason, whether that be a visual or a cognitive challenge, or a technical one where they're on low bandwidth and images aren't loading. They're going to see your alt text instead. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now, if this was a purely decorative image, like it's not really conveying anything useful to the users, you can check it as decorative. And what that's going to do is tell search engines and screen readers, this isn't critical, don't even bother reading it. Don't check this if there's critical information in the photo, but that is an available option to you. So you can see here it says all images either must have an alt attribute or be declared as decorative. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to put my puppy into the photo, and I've got my photo there now, and because it's a cover image, it allows me to put text on top of it. So we're going to say, look at this super cute puppy. I like my exclamation point. I've got some simple formatting options available to me because it's text, so I can make it bold, italic, I can apply a link to it, I can even put cross it out if I would like to, strike it out. But that is what that image caption block allows me to do. When you're working with the block editor, and again, the point being putting lots of things on the page in chunks, you do have the ability to move things around if you decide, you know what, I like this image, but I want it at the top. There are a couple of ways that you can do this. The first option is this arrow that says move up, which is my preference, because the second option is this, you see these 6 dots here, it's sort of a grab bar. I'm not good at these, so I would have to grab it and then drag it into the location that I want. But you can see I'm already having some difficulty doing that because the thing I want to put it above is so much smaller. So the really easy thing to do is just to click that move up arrow. And now that it's at the top of the page, I now get the option to either move it down or again to grab it by those bars. If you grab it by the bars and you move it, you'll see there's that blue line. That's what you're aiming for. So if I were to let it go right now, it would basically be in the same spot. If I get it so that it's just beneath this line of text, now my text is at the top of the page and my image is at the bottom again. So that's how you can easily move things around. And then the other thing to know is when you're working with these blocks, over here on the right side, you'll have a couple of tabs. The status of the page is what's under this document tab. So, you know, if it's published yet or anything along those lines, if there's a featured image, so on and so forth, adding tags, for instance. And then this block one is how you could put some additional configurations on the blocks, the individual blocks on your page. So I don't have one highlighted right now, and that's why it says no block selected. If I were to now highlight that, I get some additional options here. And these options will change based on the block that you've added to the page. So for instance, I can change my text size here to be small, normal, medium, large, or huge. I can put a specific value on it if I want to. There's a drop cap option if you want to use that. You know, basically what you're seeing here are all of the options that you have available if you're using a text block. And again, those options will change based off of the active block that you have highlighted. So this one allows you to have a fixed background, which you can see now when I scroll, the image stays in place and everything else moves. Change the color of the overlay of the image. That is terrible, so I'm going to go back to the default. You can also say how heavy you want that overlay to be. Be careful with this one. It's an accessibility trap because you have to think about color contrast. So you don't mess with this unless you know that you're passing color contrast requirements. So as you're adding your blocks to your page, keep an eye on your block configuration options. There will be more available to you based off of what you've added to the page. So I'm just going to add a few more things. Let's add a little bulleted list. So we'll say list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, and then I want to add a new item. And I just clicked tab that time, and you can see it added a new paragraph here. I'm going to get some Lorem Ipsum dummy text because I want to do a couple of things here. I want to put some text in there and show you guys what it looks like if you want to add additional columns. And then I want to get a chance to show you how to use the Pixabay plugin. So I'm going to copy that text, and I'm going to paste that in. And so I've got this in here now, and this is where I always get a little bit lost, because again, this is fairly new to me as well. Oh, you know what? I think I used the wrong kind of block. So it is layout elements. Here we go. So under the layout element blocks, you'll see there's the button, media and text, page breaks, spacers, and columns. So if I add columns in there, I can get multiple columns of text. And so the default is that it will show you just 2 columns of text. So I've got 1, and then I've got 2. But if you look over here, is it over there? I always lose this. If you look over here to the settings on your block, and I can never get this. It's supposed to give you options for additional ones, but it's still looking at the text and not at the columns. There we go. I had to click out of it. Like I said, learning it myself. But you get this option to add additional columns. So if you actually want 3 or 4, don't be in the text because it's going to give you your formatting options specifically for this text. Just click right outside of it, and you'll have this option to now have additional columns. So now you see I've got 3 columns there, so I could do that instead. So that's how you add additional columns. We have definitely had a number of people ask us how to do that. And then the last thing we're going to do is the Pixabay plugin. And again, I'm going to probably struggle a little bit. Let me see if I can find it this way. Of course I can. Was it under Widgets? Oh, that's where my forms are. Okay. So here's a little hack that I know. The classic editor is still available as a separate block. So I'm going to look for the classic one, and I'm going to click on that. And you can see this is what we used to see. If you're still using the classic editor, this is what you're going to see. And I'm going to say I want to add media. So once I click on that add media option, I can see the ones that I've already uploaded here. These are all in my media library. I could go to my hard drive if I wanted to and upload something from my hard drive. Or over here under all of these various options for adding media, I've got this option for Pixabay images. And so if you click on that, you get this search box here, and it's like a standard web search, and you can limit the results that it shows you. So I definitely don't want any clip art. I'm going to go ahead and leave horizontal and vertical checked, and I'm going to say that I want to see photos. So I often search for puppy, and I'm going to keep on keeping on so you can see some of the cute puppies that I've uploaded in the past, like that little guy. So again, these are all free to use images that have been professionally taken that you can use on your website without having to ask anybody's permission because they've already said we give our permission freely. When you select one, I'm going to select this sweet little guy over here, or a girl, I'm not really sure. What it's going to do is upload this into the back end of your site, and it's going to have all of this information that you see here available to you. So I tend to put my alt text here because it's just really easy to do it in this moment, and then it's always available whenever I go to add this image onto a page. So I'll say a black lab puppy stairs up from a wood floor with sweet puppy dog eyes. Be careful with your alt text this fit here in this case, but there is actually going to be a limit. It can change from system to system, but there is a character limit just because the idea is this is supposed to be something that's helpful to a user who's hearing it read aloud or seeing it on the page as opposed to the image if they're on low bandwidth or have images disabled. So if there's like a whole, novella written into this line, it's not useful in those cases. It's designed to be a pretty succinct to the point sentence. So if your photo really requires a ton of text to be accessible, you might actually want to consider using a different photo. Everything else that you see here, I'm going to leave it as is. So the caption information and everything. I'm not going to really mess with the size of the image as well. Here's another option or opportunity to say if it was decorative or not. But I'm going to go ahead and say insert into post. So now this image is inserted into the back end of my site. It's right aligned because that setting was in there. I can make it center align if I wanted to. I can click on this edit option and get back into sort of a modified version of that admin that we just saw. And I can say I want the image to be larger, full size. I can pick some custom sizes if I want. Like all of those options are available. By default in WordPress, this is something that really annoys me, images link to themselves. So if somebody were to be looking at this on my website, click on this image, they would open up what would look like another website page, but it's really just the file itself. I always like to change this to none. If you actually want to link it to something, you do have the ability to do that, but most of the time there's nothing to link it to. So I just change that to none. And then I've got my image in there. It's got that caption in there. I can change that if I want, if I don't like that. The one thing that I always say, though, is try not to drop the photographer's caption because, again, they've allowed you to use their stuff for free. All they really want in that case is an attribute back to them as the photographer who created it and owns the image. So you can make it smaller. It looks this big now because of this block that I'm specifically using, but there are ways to kind of minimize its presence on the page without removing it altogether. So just keep that in mind. And then again, as I'm working on my page, if I wanted this to be in a different location, maybe I don't want two blocks of text immediately next to each other, I can move it up as necessary, keep working on my page as necessary, and then once I'm happy with it, making sure I'm on my document tab, I can, oh, they moved it. There used to be a button right here where move to trash is to publish, but now it's at the top with the new WordPress. So if I like what I see, I can click publish. For your visibility, the default's always public and it will immediately be available. If you want it to be private, you can do that. Like if you only want admins and editors on the site to see it or only want people with a specific password to see it, you can do that here, as I mentioned earlier. Sometimes with conferences, the conference admins want specific things to only be available to registered attendees. So this is how you could kind of do that on a page-by-page basis. You would say that visibility level is password protected. You would here set what that password is and share that with people who have registered for your conference in one way or another. The default, though, is to typically have the visibility be public. And then for publishing, you can say publish it immediately. You can backdate it if you need to. That's typically only done with blog post pages. I don't really recommend it with website pages just because when we put information out there on our websites, we're asking our users to trust this information was here from this specific date moving forward. So we never want to kind of pull a gotcha on them as far as backdating something, especially if there's critical information in it. So really, I only recommend backdating something if it's like a blog post page and you want to kind of have a feed of blog posts up even though the website might be newer. And then the last thing you can do, if there are multiple users in your account, you can change who the author of that page is. So instead of saying Online Strategy is the account or the author of this page, I can actually say me, Natasha Mojica, is the author of this specific page. So that's something you can do here as well. But yeah, once I've got everything here set up the way I want, I would just say I want to publish the page. It's going to confirm that's what you want to do. You have the ability to turn off this confirmation down here. I leave it on just in case. And then you click publish and you can see this confirmation message that says the page is published. I'm going to click over here to view the page. And now here's my page. Any questions on this? And I can see that we're like just hitting our time. So if you need to log off, feel free to do that. I'm just going to walk through one other thing for menus before we wrap it up. All right. So I actually do have a bunch of pages and blog posts ready to go on my site. I just have them all in published. So I'm going to go to the post section, and you can see I've got all these blog posts here. I'm going to check this box right here and say bulk action edit. Click that apply button. And I'm going to change the status from draft to published. I'm going to say update. So these are now all published pages. And then I'm going to do the same thing with these other pages that I have on my site. So bulk action edit, status is published. Now the reason why I'm doing that, there are two reasons why I'm doing that. I want to create my actual menu navigation. You can see now that all those pages are published, it's a hot mess. Every single one of them is showing up in my navigation, and it's not very clean. The other reason why I publish those blog post pages is I had previously created this latest headlines page and set this as my blog post feed page. So when we go over here now, you can see all of those published blog posts are showing up in my feed. They all have a publication date of today because I did technically just publish them all, but I can always go in and backdate them as I was mentioning before. So now we're going to go into the menu section of our dashboard, and there's two ways to get to it. There was a shortcut to the menus link when I was just hovering over there, but if you're in your dashboard, your menus are going to be under the appearance section. And so I have one that I set up previously for my social media links. You might have seen that at the bottom of my website when I was just scrolling a moment ago, and those are being driven by this social media links menu that I created. But my primary navigation at the top, it has nothing. There's no rules set on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create a new menu. And you have to name it first. So I'm going to say primary nav. You can always call it whatever makes more sense to you. I'm used to the terminology primary nav, so that's what I'm doing. You can call it main menu. You can call it rutabaga. You can call it whatever you want. Just make sure it's something that makes sense to you, and you're going to be able to find it later on. So once you create it, you have to actually add stuff to it. And that is done with all of this information on the side. Now, typically, you're only going to see like pages, posts, I think projects, custom links, and categories. But because I have some other plugins turned on, I've got additional options available to me because they can also be in the navigation if I wanted them to. Right now, I'm going to stick to first pages. And then I'm going to add custom links in there. So we're going to start with these here. And I'm going to say add all of these to the menu. Now, I don't actually want all of these to be at the very top of my menu bar. Like, I don't want Natasha's Blogs 101 page to be in my menu bar when someone lands like on my home page. What I want is for it to be a subpage to my About page. And speaking of my About page, I want that to be the first link in the list. I don't want it to be last. So you can see there's some crosshairs there. All you have to do is drag up. And then for this one that I want to be a subpage, I just drag it to the right. And now you can see it's a sub item. If I don't like this label for the link, like if I don't want it to say Natasha's Blog 101 page, I can just click on that caret there to open up that accordion. And I can just take out whatever part of that I don't want in the navigation label. It doesn't change the title of the page. It just changes what that navigation label is. So I'm going to do the same thing with my Divi page. I want that under About Us. I'm going to have contact be the last one. Latest headlines can be next. And then events and research can be exactly where they are. And then the next thing I'm going to do is something I recommend. It's not necessarily as much of a requirement now that you can basically have a logo across all of our themes, is I'm going to go to custom links. I'm going to copy the link to my homepage, and I'm going to paste that in here. And then for the link text, I'm going to put home, and then I'm going to add that to my menu. And again, that got put to the very bottom. I'm going to drag it back up to the top. If I wanted to change anything about this, I could open up that caret right there again, make whatever changes I want. But if I'm happy with what I have now, I can just click Save Menu, and I am happy with what I have now. So now if I go back to my home page, we can see that nothing actually changed. And the reason why is I created the menu, but I haven't told WordPress what to do with it. So I'm going to click on Customize. And I'm going to go back to Menus to customize the layout of where my menus go. And you can see these are the two menus that I created. I can create them from this interface. I don't find it to be that easy. So that's why I like to do it from the dashboard instead. So under menu locations, we can see primary menu. That's the one that's up here at the top, has nothing assigned to it. So that's why it's kind of wild, wild west right now. So I am going to say, put the menu that I just created in that space instead. And now I've got my home link, my drop downs under the About Us page, and the rest of my links in the order that I wanted. And then down at the bottom, I'm going to uncheck this. This space here, where it's got the social links menu, because I had the forethought to create that social media links menu instead, I can just put that in this space. And based off of the links that I've put in, it's automatically displaying those icons. Now, what I did for that one is I used all custom links. And for each link, I put in the appropriate social media profile. Then in that social links menu space that's available, again, it just automatically displays whatever that, that icon is based off of the link that's there. So that's how you create your menu and put it into the space that you want. And that is actually all that I have for you guys today. But again, I know that we are over time, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know now. I'm happy to answer them. And you can put it into the chat. You can take yourself off mute. There's only 2 of you left. Don't be shy. But if you don't have any questions, that's fine. I have recorded today's session. I'll be sharing that recording with you once it's available, which will be early next week. And then I'll have those additional resources for you as well. The overview we did on color contrast, the detailed overview we did on the new block editor versus the classic editor, the presentation that we went over today. We'll go over all of that.
Hey, Natasha.
Yeah.
It's Danny. I wanted to ask about like statistics, right? Is there any way, I know you can see how many people commented, for example, but would you also show you how many people maybe read the blog post or clicked over to it, or is it just not a comment?
There are some statistics. I know it's available. I personally don't use them myself, but let me see if I can find that too for you. I don't find it here. Wait, was that it? No, that wasn't it. All right, we're going to go to the EduBlog user guide, and I know I saw this. You guys get to watch me spell things wrong. Okay. Really? Was it really that easy? So home, my sites. You guys see this? I don't see it here. There is supposed to be a link to statistics here under dashboard. The data is sourced from Google Analytics. Okay, so you do have to have your analytics configured to be on the site. So it doesn't look like it gives you like out of the box ones. It looks like it is tied to whatever's showing up in your Google Analytics, unfortunately. So if you don't have Google Analytics set up, I'm not sure if it's pulling from the same place, just based off of what I'm reading right now. But I can reach out to the vendor to get a little more information because I kind of feel like it's contradicting itself a little bit.
Right. I mean, it's okay. If it's something that doesn't come already automatically, it's probably
right. Right. Like I know WordPress does that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I can take that as an action item to find out for you and follow up.
Okay.
Any other questions?
That's all from me.
All right. Well then, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I hope you have a pleasant weekend as well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.